To work effectively, ships and their crews must work safely. Developing a safety culture will prevent personal injuries on board ships. It's not only the safe and smart way to operate, it's also mandatory. Running a safe ship is important to those who own it, to those who man it, and to those who entrust it with their cargo. It's also an important new emphasis of the revised STCW Convention and the ISM Code. Specifically, the ISM Code requires ship owners and managers to develop a safety management system that will provide for safe practices in ship operation, establish safeguards against risk, and continuously improve safety management skills. In this program, we'll feature the insight and commentary of author Richard Bracken, whose book, Personal Injury Prevention, A Guide to Good Practice, sets out the basic steps in building a true safety culture on board ship.
The worst way to do it is just to put a set of manuals on board the ship and say, follow these procedures and everything will be fine, because take it from me, it won't be. What it really is about is giving the people on the ship the ownership of the procedures. Let them have a part of it. When you're developing the procedures, go around the ship with them, take the people on board and take them to show you what safe practice is. It's an evolving process.
Turn it on by flipping this switch here.
We'll identify the 6 items of personal protective equipment recommended for individual protection. We'll discuss the ways ships can prevent accidents and injuries before they happen. And we'll see examples of the safe use of onboard tools and equipment. How serious is the business of personal injury prevention? P&I clubs estimate that after cargo claims, personal injury and illness claims are their second largest category of claims registered, accounting for more than 1/3 of the total. To dramatize the seriousness of this issue, we're going to introduce you to a couple of characters that are not quite so serious, to contrast the good with the bad.
Now, safety schmafety. Come on.
No element of personal injury prevention is as crucial as what happens before the work even begins. Work planning.
So, if you've got any questions about what you're supposed to be doing, come and see me, because it's all up here. I've done this 100 times before. I'll tell you, I've been on this ship and ships like it for years.
No matter how many times you've done it, you still need to plan it.
What's the plan?
Well, I'll tell you what. You don't know what to do today?
Am I going to paint? Am I going to sand? What am I going to do?
Well, then you're coming with me. I'll put you to work. All right? Forget this planning nonsense. It's all up here, lad.
Because as you know, last time we had a problem.
Effective planning starts at the top. The daily work planning meeting attended by senior officers, the shipboard safety officer, and the bosun assigns roles and responsibilities. The aim of the planning team is to organize the work before doing the work, with safety firmly in mind.
But I just want to make sure that all the guys are wearing either earplugs or the ear muffs.
Yeah.
That's the biggest message about work planning, is it's a stepping back. What are we going to do? What tasks are we going to undertake? And what factors have we got to consider?
Daily work planning involves job allocation, taking into account individual skills, equipment needs, interdepartmental coordination, job procedures, and preparing a daily work plan. One of the very best reasons for planning your work ahead of time is how hard it is to plan it on the spot. Lack of planning allows room for sloppiness, confusion, accidents, and of course, injuries.
In a well-planned way.
A good crew follows the daily work planning meeting with a more detailed departmental meeting to go over specifics.
You have some kind of a pan underneath to catch all the excess fuel and so forth?
The departmental meeting deals in detail with correct procedures, staff, and safety concerns. And in the case of work that might be especially hazardous, many ships use the Permit to Work system. This system requires written procedures and authorization for potentially hazardous tasks like hot work, electrical maintenance, work aloft or overside, and entry into enclosed spaces.
Essentially, this switchboard will kill you. If we open this panel, put our hands in there, it's just going to come back and find out where do we take the body. You don't get second chances with 440 volt power systems. So that's a classic environment where I would want to see a permit to work system.
Work planning and permit to work systems are based on good communication, team input, and the use of daily work plans and written authorizations. A few minutes spent planning add focus and discipline to the work that follows.
It's a structured way of doing it, and it makes the people at the top actually step back and think about the job as well. Instead of the chief engineer just saying, okay boys, go down and work on the main switchboard, and then going off and doing something else. It focuses his mind, and thus everybody else in his team, that we've got to take into account the true safety implications.
Personal injury prevention begins with personal protective equipment. In this segment, we'll talk about safety gear and how and when to use it.
Are you ready?
Ready. Okay, I'm gonna go get my safety equipment. I'm gonna get my gloves.
We don't need gloves.
Well, what about my coveralls?
We don't need coveralls.
I'm gonna need my safety goggles.
No goggles.
What about my helmet?
No. Safety schmafety. Come on. Well, what are you waiting for?
We're all familiar with personal protective equipment, sometimes too familiar. We often take it for granted or use it improperly. In personal protective equipment, PPE, there are 6 absolute essentials: boiler suits or coveralls, steel toe-capped safety shoes, safety helmets or hard hats, ear protection, gloves, and goggles.
It's not enough to simply say, here's a boiler suit and a hard hat, go away and wear it. There's a way to wear these things, you know, and there's a way that you can jeopardize your safety by thinking you're wearing equipment that's going to help you, and actually it could be doing you more harm than good.
Boiler suits provide protection from dirt, oils, and potential hazards, and at the very least, they keep clothing clean and protected. They should be fastened at the neck and wrist and be washed and repaired when they become dirty or damaged. Boiler suits should be worn at all times when working outside the living areas of the accommodation. Safety shoes must have steel toe caps for protection from impact injuries, have anti-slip soles, and be oil and chemical resistant in case of spills. Use steel toe rubber boots for wet work. Safety shoes should be worn anytime you're working outside the accommodation, including work in galleys, stores, and refrigeration spaces. Safety helmets should be worn whenever you're outside the accommodation, but as a minimum during mooring, at emergency stations, during storing and lifting operations, cargo and bunkering operations, and for all engine room maintenance.
There's a physical hard hat, there's the inlaid sort of lining and structure of the hat. We've got helmet mounted ear defenders, chin straps, all these parts of it. Alone, without the webbing, it's a hazard. It's no different to just wearing a piece of plastic on top of your head.
Safety helmets provide personal protection from bumps, knocks, and falling objects. It's not just the plastic, it's the webbing too. Ear protection should always be worn near loud machinery, in engine rooms, hydraulic rooms, fan and pump rooms, and in compressor, refrigeration, and crane spaces.
As a rule of thumb, if you can't converse normally, like in this environment, then you should be wearing ear protection.
One of the most common injuries in the maritime industry is hearing loss. The solution is ear protection, preferably built into the safety helmet itself. Leather palm gloves are good for general duty work around the ship. Use approved rubber gloves when working with chemicals, heat-resistant gloves or gauntlets for hot work, and approved insulated rubber gloves for electrical work. Gloves should be worn whenever their use will help prevent injury. Remember, there are different types of gloves suitable for different tasks. Goggles or other approved eye protection is essential when operating machine tools, handling chemicals, welding, pressure washing, grinding, chipping, and blasting. Approved eye protection is mandatory whenever there's a risk of injury to the eyes. Be aware that there are hazards in places you might not be looking for them, such as mooring and anchoring operations. To review then, there are 6 items of personal protective equipment that should be mandatory. Boiler suits, steel toe cap safety shoes, safety helmets, ear protection, gloves, and goggles. There's also plenty of specialized safety equipment you should be familiar with and know how to use as the job at hand requires, including safety harnesses and belts, flotation aids, heat-resistant clothing, dust masks and respirators, fire suits, and chemical suits.
Immediately we can see that they're telling us hard hats is a priority area. We want hard hats here. We want people wearing gloves, and we want people wearing safety footwear, anti-slip soles, steel toe caps, protective footwear.
Wearing personal protective equipment is a good start, but communicating and sharing information about safety will actually help you anticipate and prevent accidents and injuries before they occur. Going beyond simple protection is called building a safety culture. That's next. Safety isn't simply a set of rules and regulations, or even the equipment we just looked at. It's a continuous process where we look to learn and improve. We call it building a safety culture, and it's a far cry from business as usual and the way things used to be.
You think you've got things hard, mate, I'll tell you. I've done a lot harder work than this ship. I had waves crashing against the deck, 30, 40 feet high.
You won't be able to change anything on board ship unless you can change individual behaviors. That may take some work.
So you've got it easy. This is an easy life for you. You'll never have it easier than this. I've worked hard all my life. Roll on.
The basis for any safety culture is individual responsibility and accountability, personal hygiene, cleanliness, pride in yourself and your ship. Most mariners will tell you there's a relationship between good housekeeping on board ship and ship safety. Consider this fact: 45% of all personal injuries on board ship are simple slips and falls. Building a safety culture requires a team effort, with each and every individual, officer or crewman, working towards the same goal.
It's not do it this way and everything will be okay. If somebody, a junior officer comes up to you or a crew member comes up to you and says, I think we could help if we changed it this way, don't dismiss them out of hand. The procedures say this is what we do. Listen to what they're saying, because these guys do it every day of their working life, and they probably know a damn sight more about it than we do writing down rules.
A safety culture begins with commitment from the very top of the shipping organization. It's a 4-step process of continuous improvement and corrective action, driven by the senior officers and the designated safety officer.
Always make sure when you're shipping it.
Step 1 is identifying the size of the problem. Talk about safety, near misses, accidents, hazards. Work together to get a sense of what works and what doesn't.
However you do that, whether you do it in terms of lost time injuries, whether you do it in terms of accidents on board ship, whatever method you use, you have to establish what size of problem you have and what particular problems you're facing.
Step 2 is providing the correct equipment and training. We've identified the correct personal protective equipment. Get it, learn it, and use it.
It's not just give them the equipment and say, go away and wear this equipment. It's showing people how to wear it, when to use it, when's the right place for a certain type of glove, or when should you wear your ear defenders, educating people. Education and training has to be the key.
Step 3 is making safety a priority. Actions speak louder than words. When safety is a priority aboard ship, the culture will change.
It becomes a natural progression. It's not stop, what should I think about safety? You know, what factors should I now consider? After a while it just becomes second nature. It's automatic.
Step 4 is developing a reporting system. Continuous improvement is based on good communication, sorting out what works and what doesn't, and taking corrective action.
It's getting a picture of what's happening on board the ship. So, near-miss, accident reporting. An accident is any unforeseen incident. It doesn't necessarily result in an injury. So there's various stages. There's the near-miss, there's the accident, there's the injury, and still, far too often, fatality.
Safety is everybody's concern, every day. It begins with each of us individually, yet it affects the welfare of all of us. Personal injury prevention isn't just about wearing the right equipment. It's also about interacting with your environment, too. The tools and machinery that help you get the work done are also potentially hazardous if they're not handled correctly.
What are you doing?
I'm trying to get this open.
You'll never get it open with that. There's always a right tool for the job. Now back off!
There is always a right tool for every job. You just need to know which tool it is. Unfortunately, far too many accidents still occur in workshops, machinery spaces, and on deck when using handheld and machine tools. Using tools and machinery properly means knowing the right procedures and using the right protective equipment. Always wear approved and appropriate eye protection when there is any chance of eye injury. In the case of welding or other hot work, you'll need more protection. Fire-resistant clothing, welding gauntlets, and an approved welding visor. A standby or backup partner who's on site to lend assistance and help in case of trouble is essential. Keep the workshop area clean, tidy, and uncluttered. Guards must be fitted on all machinery. All tools should be stowed carefully and returned after use. And always make sure you know how and where to stop a machine before you start it. All machines should be cleaned and swept down after use. Don't use compressed air when cleaning the workshop. Flying debris can do great harm. Don't be complacent. Just because you're familiar with a tool or machine doesn't mean you should let down your guard.
You start getting into the syndrome, listen, sunshine, I've forgotten more than you know. And really, there's no place for that type of thinking, that way of thinking in a modern ship. We've recognized the problems, and I think we've got to move on from that, and everybody's got to learn together. It's an evolving process. The day we think we know it all is the day we have an accident.
Working on deck requires attention both to your own personal safety and to correct procedures.
What are you doing now? Back off here. I'll show you how to do it. Now, you've got to get a good grip.
Back problems are one of the most commonly occurring chronic injuries suffered on ships. They're the result of trying to lift something too heavy or lifting improperly. Use of a back support is recommended for manual lifting. However, the key is posture. Use the leg muscles, not your back.
This red button here allows us to also turn it on and off remotely. So watch over at that light there, and we'll turn it off.
Ships have many types of lifting equipment that require safe operating procedures. There are universally acknowledged hand signals which are used to communicate among crew members when lifting. When using lifting equipment, never lift people. Keep off. Always operate within safe working load limits. Never use lifting equipment to drag loads. Secure and lock lifting equipment when it's not in use. And use a signalman, when appropriate, who is in visual contact with the operator and any other personnel involved. An important part of working on deck is simply staying out of the way of operations that might be hazardous. This applies especially to cargo operations, lifting operations during maintenance, mooring, and anchoring. Know what's happening on deck and who's responsible. If you're not needed for a particular operation, stay clear. Safe ships clearly identify safe transit lanes for personnel and areas that require extra caution. They post warning signs and safety notices indicating where cargo work is underway and other relevant information. They maintain constant communication on ship and on shore to ensure that all relevant safety procedures are enforced.
You want everybody to play in the same direction, everybody's playing the same game. So if you can build some relation between the different parties, the loading master, the chief officer on board the ship, build a relationship, they'll make you aware of what's going on. You make them aware of what you're doing, what you consider important. If you want everybody to come on board your ship wearing a hard hat, then you tell them that. And if they don't want to do it, then you provide them with it. You can see just as we come on.
Ensure that the gangway or any other means of access is rigged correctly. Gangways should be adjusted to suit prevailing conditions, have effective safety nets, and be well lit. It's important that there are procedures in place to greet, register, and accompany guests who may not be familiar with your safety practices.
Earmuffs and the goggles. And when you go down to the engine room, make sure you got...
Ideally, we would have a box of safety equipment at the gangway, maybe at the top of the gangway, so when somebody comes on board, you're saying to them, okay, you're entering our environment now, we want you to wear a hard hat, but just to make sure we've got one here for you, we've got coveralls, and if you haven't got safety shoes on and you haven't got the rest of the equipment, then I'm afraid you can't come on board.
When you go on deck, your environment changes. You must be aware of what's going on. You must wear correct equipment, and you must think safety first. Staying safe at sea means expecting the best, but being prepared for the worst. In this final segment, we'll look at the ways planning and preparation can help you anticipate problems and deal with them if they occur. No matter how many signs we post or reminders we make, accidents still happen.
What are you doing now?
I'm just cleaning up these brushes.
You don't know what work is. That's not work.
The reason that I like people to try this stuff on ahead of time is because in an emergency situation, we don't want you to have any surprises. We want you to know what to expect when you get this stuff on. There we go.
Onboard training should always include the use of shipboard emergency equipment and a review of emergency procedures. There should be emergency procedures in place for hot work incidents, for oil leaks or spills, for galley emergencies, electrical accidents, and for incinerator problems. Don't take any environment for granted.
You've got to think of every environment as a potentially dangerous environment. As we look around the room, there's a deep fat fryer, there's a cooker, there's an oven, there's a baking stove, all this equipment is potentially dangerous. Sharp objects, sharp knives, different considerations that the people working in this environment have got to take into account.
Even with effective precautions and procedures, things can still go wrong. Consequently, there's no substitute for drills, such as this one involving coordination between shoreside and shipboard firefighters. The more realistic the drill and the appraisal of your results, the better. An essential part of an effective safety culture is feedback, evaluation. Don't worry about mistakes, just make sure you learn from them.
It's a case of gathering the information together and then deciding how best to adopt best practices to improve it. So it's a continually evolving...
That's the closing of the loop.
Yeah, and that's where the likes of STCW and ISM are so important, and they really have brought shipping into the modern era of shipboard practices, procedures, and sort of this closing of the loop, which is so important.
Building a safety culture turns a challenge into an opportunity to run a better, more efficient, and more productive ship with less hazard to people, equipment, and cargo. To sum it up then, include safety in all familiarization of new crew members. Remember, effective drills are among the best training tools, along with continuous safety training. Approach work planning conscientiously and with safety uppermost in your mind. Finally, wear the 6 essential pieces of personal protective equipment.
When you're going to your workplace, in the workplace, or coming back from the workplace, you should wear that safety equipment right up really until the changing rooms, when you come out of the engine room, or when you go into your cabin and take off your hard hat and hang it on the hook. Wherever you keep your equipment, some people keep it in their cabin, some have a locker room, whatever. That's the time when you take off the safety equipment, but you don't also drop the safety culture.
We'd like to offer our special thanks to author Richard Bracken for his contribution to this program, to the crews and the ships that helped us in the taping, and even to our misguided bosun, Nigel. You now know that safety and personal injury prevention is an evolving process. It requires your commitment to continuous improvement and your attention. And remember, be careful. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, accidents happen.